Guys ready?
Oh, big crowd.
I'd like to call to order the Board of Commissioners study session for Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024 at 9 a.m. Bonnie, will you please do the roll call?
We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, whoops, yep. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right.
Now we do the roll call.
Yes, sir. Andrews? Here. Flynn? Here. Morris? Here. Nelson?
Here.
Seifert?
Here.
Walter? Here. Hewitt?
Here.
And I'm not sure if Commissioner McAllister is coming or not. I haven't heard. And Commissioner Henschel is excused today.
I have not heard. Thank you. Bonnie, will you please, we're going on public comment. Will you please read public comment rules?
Got him this time. Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners which is required to be open to the public under the provisions of the Michigan Open Meetings Act. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board may state his or her name and address and township or district. Providing a specific address is not recommended. Persons may address the board on matters or issues which are relevant and germane to county government as determined by the chairperson. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions, if any. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. The chairperson may, at his or her discretion, allow an additional opportunity or time to speak if determined germane and necessary to the discussion. Public comment will be solicited during the 2 public comment periods noted in Rule 5.4 Order of Business. However, public comment may be received during the meeting when a specific agenda topic is scheduled for discussion by the board. Prior to the first public comment, the chairperson will indicate the topics on the agenda for which public comment will be accepted. Members of the public wishing to comment should raise their hand or pass a note to the clerk in order to be recognized and shall not address the board until called upon by the chairperson. The board shall not comment or respond to a person who is addressing the board. Silence or non-response from the board should not be interpreted as disinterest or disagreement by the board. Please be respectful and refrain from personal or political attacks.
Thank you, Bonnie. Do we have anybody that'd like to make a public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on. We have an agenda in front of us. This is a study session, so does anybody have any questions on the agenda or a motion to approve?
Move to accept the agenda as presented.
Support.
We have a motion by Nelson, support by Morris. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to 5A, verbal update on security cameras.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner Jewett. We have Mr. Byrd and Mr. Dupuy here to present to you the discussion that we talked about previously as an update on our cameras, security cameras, countywide. As you recall, we have piecemealed this throughout the county, and we wanted to have a discussion about how we could do this uniformly and consistently throughout the county. And Mr. Dupuy and Mr. Byrd have worked on this project and are here to present to you, Mr. Byrd.
Good morning, Commissioners and staff. Greg Byrd, Emergency Management Coordinator for the county. Just to correct Mr. Alger, working on the project. It's a work in progress, but what I wanted to give you is a kind of a broad overview and prefer a discussion other than trying to do a PowerPoint was when we talk about adding the cameras, it's a layer. It's a tool in the toolbox, if you will, for the overall project of the safety and security of our staff and visitors. This goes hand in hand with a little bit of what you've heard from the safety team with the policy work. It's also going hand in hand with planning and some of the other things that we've done with the building assessments, first aid kits, the surviving an active threat FEMA training that we've started to undertake that you have supported. So this is kind of the next phase that we know has come up. Cliff is going to give you kind of a broad view of our piecemeal system that we have now. And him and I have had an initial meeting, and we both agreed to get this thing started that we didn't necessarily need to reinvent a wheel. We didn't think that's what you all wanted. We have community partners that have very robust security camera systems. I have access to both of those and use them routinely. They're very user-friendly, much more user-friendly than ours. And so we wanted to start, and where we have started so far is visiting our partners at TCAPS. I conducted a thorough interview and assessment of their system this past week. They have a 950 camera system throughout their buildings. We learned about their vendor and their project and why they use the cameras that they use. It's a two-person department that manages that whole system. It's very user-friendly. It's very easy to learn. As far as my use of it, it's for if there's emergencies at schools or incidents at schools where we're assisting law enforcement. And it was very intuitive, very crystal clear. There's a lot of good features to that our current system doesn't have. So on the schedule for tomorrow then is a tentative scheduled visit with our partners at NMC. They have another very good, easy to use camera system, and that's where we're going to go with the assessment. Cliff and I's thought process, and unless you tell us different, we're going to work with administration. We're going to put together a vendor process either with existing or new or both, and we're going to bring you probably a project that has a total approach for doing everything at once, but then also because knowing that's going to be a pretty penny, I think we're going to bring you a phased approach and let you tell staff and us of how you want to go forward at that point in time. I'm a firm believer we do need a better security system. We need the ability to give our employees in the first floor of this building, the health services building, access to see things coming through the parking lot, access to be able to secure their doors in an appropriate amount of time before the threat is in the building. And we don't have that, which would come with a camera system. And I digress. I forgot to mention another piece of that is John has been leading up you approved the added door locking systems to start with the health services building next week. So use that as an example of upgrading those, giving the receptionist staff the ability to lock the doors with a push of a button. Now, if we upgrade the security camera system, that they can actually see if someone's coming through the parking lot that's a threat, they can actually secure the building before the threat gets to the building. So that's sort of the things that we're looking at. We agree that this basically needs to be our common areas, our open areas, and our entryways. It's not about putting a camera in every office, and certainly that's not the concern, but that's kind of where we're coming from as a broad view. And with that, I'll shut up and let Mr. Dupuy tell you what we have.
Thank you. Cliff Dupuy, IT. I'm just going to kind of walk through what we're doing, what we have. So before we get started, I think it's important that you understand what the definitions are and some of the things I'm going to talk about today, because it can get techie. So we have what we call NVRs. Those are network video recorders. Think of a physical device, a DVD player basically that records items. And then we have a virtual NVR. So a virtual NVR is exactly what you think. It's a video recorder, but it sits in the cloud. Retention, we're required to keep at least 30 days of video retention. That is per the Record Retentions Act out of Lansing. Two types of cameras that we have. They're IP cameras, IP being Internet Protocol. So those cameras sit on the same network as what your computers are. They have a plug that goes in the back of them, and they can talk to the devices. And then a PoE is Power over Ethernet. So that's a technology that's been around longer, but it's a newer technology. So you have one cable that comes into the camera that shares the video and also provides the power for the cameras. So you don't have to have a separate power source for the cameras. And so that's just a brief overview of the definitions. Current state. Our current manufacturer of cameras are Axis. I've used Axis, so having spent 20 years in K-12, I've installed a lot of camera systems. I was also part of the 2012 DNC in Charlotte, so the City of Charlotte Police Department. I was one of the partners that helped develop the camera systems for the DNC that we have in Charlotte. So if you're ever in Charlotte, just about every street corner is covered, and it's very detailed. Our software application that we use is called ExactVision. It's an older system. It hasn't had a lot of enhancements. It's very robust, but it is an older system. It's kind of long in the tooth. We do partner with a local vendor who manages our cameras for us. That's EPS Security. They will come and troubleshoot, move cameras, tickets, and things like that, whatever the need might be. Internal management. As of August in 2024, Mr. Chase and I met, and in the past, facilities was responsible for cameras, locations, and maintenance. That got moved over to IT, which is actually a better fit, because they are pretty much an IT function. If we need a camera installed, if we need a cable run, we go back to our partner in facilities, and they're always quite capable of doing that for us. But that was a transition. So up until August of 2024, IT was really out of the camera business. Placement. There's, as Mr. Alger alluded to, there's no real plan about where placements go. Departments will say, I want a camera. They get their camera. That's pretty much the way it was in the past up until about August of 2024. Access, which is a bane of mine, there's no vetting process about who can see the cameras. An individual says, I want to see the cameras. Past practices, they get to see the cameras. So you get departments who, because of a person's title, they get access to a camera. Because they want to watch their employees come in and out of a building, they get access to a camera. Literally, because they want to see when their Jimmy John order comes, they get to see the front door, so when they know when their orders are here. So there's no real vetting process as to who has access to the cameras and what the need is and why. And then storage. In all instances, I'm going to go through each department here. It's pretty quick. It's not a large presentation. Storage is maintained on the physical device, the NVR, the network video recorder I spoke about, except for the one we have in the cloud.
You say you have one that's in the cloud, or?
That's correct. So the camera locations we have are at the Government Center, the Hall of Justice, the Civic Center. There is a camera in Veterans Affairs that points to the front office. We don't have any input to that. That was installed by Veterans Affairs. And then the Grand Traverse County Jail has a specific vendor that deals with jails and cameras, and that's a vendor-supported application, and that's not managed by EPS or Information Technology. So inside the Government Center, this is where we have our single virtualized NVR. There are 15 cameras. We maintain 31 days worth of retention, and then you can see the coverage aspects on that. I'm not going to read those to you. Front and rear entrances, we do have it over the first floor vault. And then there's the one central dispatch server, because that's a critical component to the county and emergency response, so that's managed as well. And then we have a viewing of the election drop boxes. So that's the coverage for the Government Center. For the Hall of Justice, that's a physical NVR. There are 29 cameras. We maintain 40 days of video retention for that. And you can see the coverage as the courtrooms, public, external doors, and the holding cells. Law Enforcement Center, we do have, that's another physical NVR, 15 cameras. That has a 54-day retention. And you might wonder why the retention is different. It depends on the volume of video that's being recorded. The more volume you have, the less retention, but we are maintaining that record retention. Best thing to remember about retention, whether it's email, videos, or anything, every second is another 30 days. So if you think about it, it's just not the end of a 24-hour day, 23 days, you go out 30 days from today. It's every minute of that day we have to maintain that 30-day retention. So it's a lot more than just thinking of it as a physical day. We do have interview rooms at the Law Enforcement Center with audio. It's one of the few that we do with audio. Obviously, there's some, reason for that. And then there's a dedicated one in the evidence room, which is critical. Civic Center is another physical NVR. We have 11 cameras. Again, 43 days of retention, and you can see the entrances, the coverage right there. They have the parking lot and the restroom buildings and public access in the skate park. Veterans Affairs, we have no NVR. We're doing no record retention. There's only one camera, and it's a live feed, and it monitors the front reception area. Yes, sir.
Is that going to be a violation because they don't retain the records?
My personal opinion is yes. That's just a personal opinion. And then, of course, I spoke about the jail. The jail is a managed system, a vendor managed system, and that's unique to the jail, so that makes total sense to what they're doing. What we'd like to see for a future state, we'd like the partnership management. So when the discussion was had at the board meeting several weeks ago, I reached out to Greg. I said, hey, you and I need a partner on this. He agreed, we met, and then he's been setting up the site visits for us. He has a thorough knowledge of the planning piece, and with my information on the staff's information with the physical aspect, it makes a good partnership between the two of us. We'd like to move to an enterprise cloud storage. One of the challenges we had during the cyber event was that 2 of the NVRs were bricked because because it has an operating system. They viewed it as a computer and or a server, and so they bricked 2 of the NVRs, meaning that they weren't accessed. Partner with other county entities, the college, the schools. We can really learn a lot from what they're doing and look at some of their leading practices that they're doing. Obviously, school districts, having worked in that environment, they're going to be a very robust camera system, which is needed in today's world. Same thing that we need here. Best of class application. We're going to be viewing the demonstrations at the things. We're going to come back to you with a request for proposal, like Mr. Bird said. It'll be if all or nothing or a tiered approach, and you can, we're going to bring that to you for consideration. I'd like to work with HR to define, and with Mr. Bird, a defined vetting process, who gets access to the cameras, not because of your title or because you want to watch your Jimmy John order. Just there has to be a reason for that. And again, coordinate with the departments. We know we're in a building process, looking at building out some different facilities. It'd be real critical for us and for Mr. Bird to be able to partner with those departments and understand the flow of people coming in and out of the building, the secure areas and things like that. Things of what we've kind of done here at the Government Center with the with the vault and the Dropbox. And with that, we are here to take your questions. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Nelson?
Have you tied any of the cameras, or are you looking at tying the cameras to an alarm type setting, so certain hours, if there's movement in certain areas? I mean, is that one of the things you guys are looking at?
We absolutely are. So there are systems out there, and I've used them in the past, where you get a picture, but then something happens, event happens, and it has the ability to go back and capture however you program it, the first 30 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever the case may be. Another one that I've done when I was with the DNC was that tied it in so law enforcement, all they had to do is come up to the building and plug in, or all they had to do is add a code or whatever, and they could instantly see what was happening in the buildings, which is critical. That's just my opinion.
Commissioner Walter?
Thank you. Question about internal management. You mentioned that right now it transitioned over to IT. So does that mean that there is IT staff like watching feeds, or it just means management of the system?
So the feeds, great question. The feeds are monitored. Currently, they're monitored in dispatch because they're a 24-hour department. My thought would be that we have the security guard now at the front counter that they could manage. They could monitor all the camera systems during the day, and then we could flip it over to dispatch at night. To answer your question, we're doing break fix. We don't do any monitoring.
Okay. But there are, so it sounds like some cameras are monitored, or all by dispatch? Some. Okay. Maybe the more
critical ones, yes. I don't want to say all because that would be incorrect and I would be misleading you.
Okay, so then there's kind of 2 reasons maybe for the cameras. One is recording information for possible future use if there's a crime or breach of some kind. And then one is preventative in certain areas if there maybe is a threat or something. Is that correct? And am I missing another reason why?
No, Mr. Bird brought up a really good point, the parking lot situation. So in the camera world, they have what they call a pan-tilt zoom camera. So a pan-tilt zoom does exactly what you think. It'll go up and down, left and right, and zoom in, zoom out. Those are critical applications, devices to have when you're looking at situations such as a parking lot, that you can zero in, and you see some of those things when you see some of the videos on top.
If you do need to.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was trying to make it. Thank you.
You do too, Bonnie. I couldn't even hear you.
Boom, boom.
That's good, because I was just talking to you.
I know.
Oh,
Side
Yeah,
note,
please.
side note.
Commissioner Walter, to clarify maybe, our purpose to use cameras is not necessarily for surveillance, which there's a misnomer. We're not looking at paying attention necessarily to what our employees are doing. We're looking to use these as safety, or if a crime has committed, the ability to go back and see if we've seen that crime or that suspicious activity or that threat. And the agencies that have permanent control or can watch them, like dispatch, when they're here, they watch certain cameras. But if they get a call of something going on at the Civic Center, then they can pull up the Civic Center's camera to see if there's footage that they can give that information to emergency services that are going and responding. So we had to take it from, we're not in the business to do surveillance. There's no job descriptions or personnel that have that surveillance title. We're looking at the camera system as a security aspect and a safety aspect, but just, again, as another tool to amplify our ability to protect our visitors and our employees.
Thank you.
Commissioner Andrews?
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. I'm familiar with the schools where, you walk up to push the button to get into your kid's school, and somebody on the other side of that desk or wall can see you. And then you mentioned that TCAPS has 2 staff people. I assume that the video is accessible in multiple places simultaneously. Is that a fair assumption? So that for different purposes. In terms of partners, I've got to believe another county in Michigan has done this in the last few years, and it may be that MAC can provide some resources in terms of some county examples.
Absolutely, and I know Mr. Dupuy and I, as well as Mr. Chase, and the sheriff, we get information every day. We wanted to start local, with our local partners and the systems that we know that exist that are currently more user-friendly and newer and rapidly transitioning and staying new and up to date with the current threat situation, and they're right in our backyard.
Right. No,
But
that
yes,
makes sense.
Absolutely, and we can rely on our MAC partners for that and all of that.
My last point is on the retention. As a person who has dealt with old records, as soon as you don't comply with the 30-day retention policy, if that's your policy, you open yourselves up to all kinds of negative consequences. So I just got to say that if that 30 days is our minimum and we're required and you've got no reason to extend it, I would fully support a policy where we purge after 30 days as a matter of policy.
It's a significant concern because if you get a FOIA for video, it's not one-to-one. So if you have 24 hours of video and somebody requests that through FOIA, I want a day's worth, 3 days worth, 6 days worth, 30 days worth. That is multiple hours per hour reviewing FOIA for redaction purposes. It's a major consideration, and it's significantly costly. And the sheriff is here with the implementation of body-worn cameras, wonderful devices. They have a cost associated with them that is unintended.
And to your point, Ms. Andrews, if you could share that same sentiment regarding email with the 2-year retention, I would be very grateful for that.
I mean, if we don't have a policy that it says we destroy after and we comply with it, we're just setting ourselves up for discovery, FOIA.
Yep.
Commissioner Walter, do you have
Yeah,
any
I
questions?
had a couple more I didn't get to ask. You mentioned access. Right now, if someone wants a camera, wants access to see it, then you grant it. So do their employees know that then they might be watched? Like, are the employees notified that someone is able to see them on camera?
I can't speak to that. I wouldn't know.
Okay, I'm interested in a policy understanding of that too from HR. Like, that feels very squishy to me and odd, and if I were an employee, I'd maybe be concerned about not knowing, or if you can let us know about that. And then the other thing about the veterans camera, knowing where their kind of office is situated and they can't see when people come in, I'm assuming that's why they have the camera that shows the front area.
Correct.
I'm just wondering why it's not managed, and then can just any department decide to do their own thing, or?
Up until August, that's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Is there a new policy that has been communicated? And
There is significant enforcement of leading practices and working with departments to help them understand that.
Okay.
There's nothing written, there's no policy to answer. The short answer is no, there's not a policy.
Okay, so maybe
That-
just as we develop this more, some policies will come out of it, and,
There will have to
Communicate.
be a policy included
Thank
in
you.
this process to include what your first concern was, Commissioner Walter, is what are we recording? Why are we recording it? We do not want to get in the practice of recording individual workspaces, but the purpose of the policy needs to be safety, and ultimately, if there's a crime committed, we have the ability to potentially use that footage for a solution. And it's a tightrope in some instances. We had a request, we want to video a parking lot. Why? What are we watching in a parking lot? Well, there are people parked there. It's a public parking lot. They're allowed to park there. Well, we think they're doing drugs. Oh, okay. Which problem are we trying to solve? And that will drive the solution ultimately.
Cliff or Greg, how long do you guys think you need before you'd have a recommendation to us? I know you got some meetings scheduled and whatnot, but
Yeah, I would, partnering with the building committee, because that's going to be an aspect of it too, I would say 6 months.
okay.
We would like this to we would also like to work with Cunningham Limp Partners in Architecture as we walk through this process. We could use this as a beta for what are we doing countywide, and we would like to include them in that FMP process. And so that pushes us into 25, quite frankly.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions?
Thanks for looking at this.
Yep, appreciate it. Moving on in the agenda, we have understanding ongoing maintenance. John?
Good morning, Commissioners. To pull a presentation up here. There we go. Good morning, John Chase, Director of Parks and Facilities. So we're going to talk today about asset management planning, particularly about a comprehensive asset management. I know there have been questions about that, and we want to have an opportunity to have a discussion. And we're going to look at this in 4 different areas. So supporting our existing facilities, how we're doing that, and some of the tools that we're using for that. Defining maintenance, repair, and capital. And essentially talking about redefining that. We look at it one way now. I'd like us to kind of take a look at that a different way. And then planning for future renovation and future construction, as well as long-term funding options to be able to put a plan like this in place. So first, in terms of supporting our existing facilities, for our facilities team, we've got 8 professionals that are part of that team. We've got electricians on staff, we've got HVAC techs on staff, and we've got plumbers, as well as a carpenter and generalists on staff that can do a lot of things within our properties, but then also we contract programs out for larger, more complex projects, so we can make sure we're making the best use of our internal resources. We've had some discussion about some past projects, but I want to just give everybody an idea of some of the things that have taken place here during 2024. So we've done some, you've got a lot of acronyms on here, so I'll try and go through some of these acronyms just because they fit better on here. So Health Services Building is the HSB, so we've done foundation repair in the Health Services Building. We've added gutters to the Health Services Building and the Public Services Building to smooth out the water flow. Done interior renovations at the Public Service Building and access control renovations at the Historic Courthouse. We've added access control to the 3rd floor at that building. And then a number of things we've done at Civic Center, the ball field restrooms, an interior restroom, Civic Center fields, the family changing room that is the interior restroom, and then a surge pit replacement, which we did in July. And then the picture here is some boilers that we're working on, continuing to work on, thank you, at the Law Enforcement Center. We're putting those in place. And then 2024 projects that are in progress or have already been scheduled. So the roof picture that you see here, that's the roof at the Civic Center that you had approved a couple of months back. We're actually going to start that project this coming Monday. And what you're looking at is the first section, so-called Section 5, that was scheduled in that project. And then we also added Section 4 to that. So thank you for making that addition. We're adding some, replacing doors at the Howe Arena, and then replacing the roof at Civic Center, continuing to work on those boilers and finishing that up should be very soon. And then access control at the Health Services Building, which Mr. Bird just mentioned a moment ago. So those are the in-progress projects or scheduled projects. A sampling of some of the things that we're looking for the 2025 year, and we've put these into our CIP budget already, so these items have come to you, but I've just included a list of some of those items as well as just a picture of one of those that's on the docket, and that is that picture that you're looking at is the sidewalks out in front of the jail and the historic courthouse. And we'll talk a little bit about how we get to that particular point here in just a moment. But the things that you see listed here are some of the things that we've got planned for 2025, budget dependent on that. In terms of maintenance, repair, and capital improvements. So I want to take a minute to define those three. And up to date, we've been looking at a CIP budget that kind of combines all of these things, but I want to split them apart. So first, maintenance and repair. So if we just draw a distinction between maintenance and repair, so maintenance is proactive. That's the scheduled things. That is regular cleaning. That's inspection. That's general upkeep of things before they get to the point where we're repairing those. And so repair is reactive, and largely that's where we are now. And so we're restoring an asset after it breaks or is damaged. Those are unplanned, and much to Mr. Bott's dismay, those tend to be more costly. So we are trying to shift toward that more maintenance mode and less so on the repair mode. So some of the things that are in progress to help us get there. So one is an asset inventory. So the piece at the top there is not intended for you to be able to read all those individual words on there, but that's a sampling of some of the things that are in our asset inventory right now. We've got about 1,200 things that are in the asset inventory. We're realigning some of those. Some of them are not as valuable. It'll say exit sign, for example, but doesn't have a location. So we've got maybe 25, 50 exit signs. So, but we're filling that with all the things that are a part of our building envelope, our mechanicals, our electricals, our plumbing, and then equipment that is used to maintain the properties. So we're inventorying all those assets so we can then better understand the assets, understand the maintenance history or the repair history, as well as maintenance history for those assets. And then within that, we're including the age, we're including the condition, the useful life, our original cost, as well as our predicted cost in the future. And we've talked about this at a previous meeting, but that is underway at this point. We're starting that process. And as well, including maintenance and repair history. The system that we use to manage our workflow will allow us to do some of this, including tag those assets and then have an idea of when we've maintained those assets or when we've had to repair those assets so we can see that history. That's all leading to the predictive and preventative maintenance. So that preventative maintenance that we were talking about earlier, that is the scheduled stuff. So the stuff that's in the background here are the things that we're adding to our preventative maintenance schedule. We've got 23 items in our preventative maintenance schedule right now, so that gives you that indication of we're more in that repair mode, not as much in the preventative mode. We've got a list of about 150 items that we're loading in there, very detailed items so we don't forget those things and they're done on a regular basis. Now, many of those 150 things are being done now, but not all are done as consistently, and we want to make sure that they are, and having them actually written down and then logged and tracked will help us do that. It also helps us better understand, and that's where the predictive maintenance comes in. There's actually tools, again, within our system that we have now and within other systems that will allow us to use actually artificial intelligence to understand the maintenance history and understand the repair history and then be able to predict based on patterns what's happening and when something might fail in the future. Our workflow management system that we use. So we are not simply using a spreadsheet or sticky notes to manage our workflow. We have a maintenance system, so it's called eMaint. It is a Fluke product, so they're a well-known company in the maintenance world. And that CMMS stands for Computerized Maintenance Management System, in case you're wondering what that is. So it allows us to do remote entry of work orders, meaning that anybody in any building can access a work order submission form. They can put that work order in. It comes to our office, and then we're able to parcel those out to the staff. So it manages the work order management. It will support our preventative maintenance management program. It'll support asset management. And then we're also going through a process here in the next couple of months of upgrading that to allow greater field access. Right now, our techs don't have access in the field to that data. So today when they come in, we're actually printing off something in the morning out of the system and handing that to the staff, and they've got their work orders for the day. We want to change that to make that more efficient and give them a tool in their hand that they can use that and manage the work orders while they're in the field as well as follow up on those, take pictures, and then and report back to the people who are putting in those work orders what's happened to that work order. So that is underway as well. So maintenance and repair are two pieces. The third piece is capital improvement. And today we've been defining our CIP, our capital improvement plan, as maintenance, repair, and capital items. So it includes all three of those items. Capital is specifically defined as a permanent structural change to a property or an asset to protect its value or protect its life or enhance its capabilities. So we're not necessarily looking at capital in the terms of the CIP just as capital. We're looking at all three of those items. So I'd like just to take the opportunity to kind of redefine that and look at things that are capital, so improving that usefulness or life expectancy of facilities. And this is not intended to include tech upgrades, which Mr. Dupuis working on, or vehicles, and those are both handled separately. So this is just the building envelope, the mechanicals, the electricals, the plumbing, that sort of stuff, and then the equipment that goes along to support that. The second piece of defining CIP is the repair and maintenance, and then we are moving toward that multi-year approach. We've not had that multi-year approach in the past. We're moving toward that in terms of our capital. With that, if I split that out, we've taken a look at our CIP requests for the year, and the total CIP request is $3.74 million. But if we split that out and have a better understanding of which parts of that are repair and maintenance and which parts of that are actual capital, we can see that $2.72 is repair and maintenance, and $745,000 is capital improvement. And when we first started talking through this idea, and when we got down to taking a look at this in paper and we split this out, it was pretty eye-opening to us when we recognized in dollars how much we're spending on the repair, and most of that is repair at this point as opposed to proactive. So like I said, we're moving toward that more proactive approach. But we're really surprised at how much we were spending on the repair and maintenance and not as much on the actual capital piece of capital. So with that third piece of the program, planning for a future renovation and construction, we can't do that without looking at one piece, which is deferred maintenance. We've had conversations in the past here regarding deferred maintenance, and yes, we do have deferred maintenance in our properties. The picture that you're looking at is actually the basement of one of our buildings. All those pink ribbons that you see hanging from the ceiling, those pink ribbons are hanging on valves. And those valves are identified by those pink ribbons because the valve cannot be turned, meaning that you do not have the ability to close the water off to that specific area. There are a lot more pink ribbons in that space than show on this particular photo. So those are things that we've deferred over time for a number of reasons. Just again because it's aging infrastructure. We've had budget constraints, planning or lack thereof. Facility load is another thing that can affect how much maintenance we do. And then just unforeseen emergencies. We have something that comes up that needs attention. That's going to mean that something else can't get done based on all those other factors. So, but this is one. So we definitely do have that. Now to figure out what our deferred maintenance backlog looks like, the best way that we can come up with to be able to do that at this point is to look back at the study that was done by Tower Pinkster for our facilities master plan and dig into their facilities assessment part of the project. And looking at that, you can see some of the areas here. So the jail has a $13.2 million number that would require us to put $13.2 million into that particular property to bring it up to what it really should be. As well, the government center, $8.8 million, $2.3 million at the law enforcement center, and then much smaller amounts at the facility shop and COA garage, but those are some of the two larger, or the top five that were listed in there. The facility shop and the COA garage, I should mention, that's something that will be taken care of with the Project Alpha. So thank you very much for your help on that. And that's one of those things that you look at and you say, well, how do we go forward with this? Is it sensible for us to go forward and make those repairs, or is it sensible for us to go forward and do something different with that? So in addition to looking at that facilities assessment, we also have to look at all the action plans that are in place. So that facilities assessment being one, our strategic plan as a county being another. Departmental plans, so I've listed a couple that we have in place through Parks, so our 5-year recreation plan, our VASA improvement plan, as well as our Civic Center master site plan, and then other departmental plans that are in place as to what those departments are intending to do. All those things will help guide where we go. So you have to kind of take a look at those and say, then we have a decision that we have to make, which is a repair or replace decision. At what point does it make sense for us to keep putting money into a project or into a building versus moving to a different building? So, and again, you've taken that step with Project Alpha of saying we don't have the capacity that we need. Let's look at a different way to be able to do that. So the last piece is a long-term funding options to implement an asset management plan, and that's something that we're looking for your help for. I'm looking for that kind of guidance on that, and thinking this is an opportunity to have that discussion. So, one is I'd like to be able to incorporate a comprehensive asset management plan into the annual budget, and really taking a look at that long-term approach, and the second piece being that long-term forecasting of cost and capacity to make sure that we're funding projects. But then that last piece is, how do we move forward with that? And do we need to look at our fund balance policy, for example? And then this is a question that I'm asking of all of you. Do we need to look at something like that in order to redefine that CIP? You know, like I said, we're looking at that as CIP encompassing everything, but was that really the intention for CIP to encompass everything, repair, maintenance, and capital? So, with that, I'd like to open the floor for any questions and comment on any of the things discussed.
Do we have any questions? Commissioner Walter?
Just a huge thank you for pulling this together, because this is, I think we've talked about getting a better handle on this and understanding it, and it did come partially out of our tours when we saw kind of the bowels of some of the buildings and some of the glaring maintenance needs, just kind of tip of the iceberg on some things. So I really appreciate you pulling it together in this format. And these are great questions, and I'm wondering, given this right now, if maybe we want to set aside another study session at some point to talk about the fund balance policy related to, because right now the CIP does, like you shared, encompass all of that, and it's confusing. And it's also the CIPs I've seen the last couple of years are very incomplete. And so I think because you're so detail oriented and will bring all of these maintenance, repair, and capital needs, I am in favor of revisiting that policy as far as what might make most sense, especially if you do take out maintenance and repair from the CIP and have the CIP really be a CIP. I'm happy to support that conversation anyway. I don't know what kind of pros and cons, what that would look like. Do you have a feeling on that?
Well, I guess my thought is, if we look at, again, CIP, capital improvement program, if we look at that narrowly and we say, well, the only thing that goes in there are the capital items, then we need to figure out a way to be able to fund all those repair and maintenance items. And we're funding them all within that fund right now. So do we continue to do that with the knowledge that all of that stuff goes into CIP, or do we have to break that up? So I don't know the answer on that one.
Is there not, in the facilities part of the budget, is there not money in there that supports maintenance and repair?
There is. Yes, we've got a building.
So it's kind of in both places?
Yes.
Just not to the level that we have learned through this process that the lion's share of that is actually preventative versus that capital. So to your question, Commissioner Walter, we have a fund balance policy that basically says anything over and above 30% is split 50-50. Right now, that balance is roughly 1.8 in CIP. We're going to put 3.5 back into that from this year's transfer. So we could say, and this is just discussion, we could say suspend the fund balance policy for 2024 or 2025 if you wanted to do it in a future year, and dedicate the transfer that would go to the CIP to the preventive maintenance portion of our budget, or any number of opportunities that you have within that discussion. That is a possibility. Right now, I don't think our budget could sustain the, what was it,
2.7 for repair.
There's no way
3.5.
we could do that in the 2025 budget at this point unless we did something like that. So that is a way we could address this. When we split that we have interest in splitting these two funds, we have to fund both of them, and how we could do it is through the fund balance policy.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you think because, you're really bringing together all this information on so much deferred maintenance and preventative work that, there'll always be maintenance and preventative care,
Both
right?
of those pieces will always be there.
However, because we're so behind with that, and correct me if you think otherwise, but it feels like to us we are behind. Although we'll always have it, I don't want to change the policy and then in a couple years think, okay, we're been making headway and we really should put more into just capital now because we have this FMP. We should be trying to put money in toward making those capital improvements that maybe come out of the FMP. So do you support that idea that, in a few years we won't be as heavy on preventative maintenance and lighter on capital because we haven't even identified some of these capital improvement projects in the budget yet?
So I think by focusing more on the preventative piece of that, I think that will help us turn the tide. So we've not focused as much on the preventative. We've waited for something to break and then repaired it at that particular time. So yes, I think that will help us. But there's a lot there that needs to be done. So again, that's another piece where it comes to, at some point, we need to make that decision of, do we continue to do preventative maintenance on something that is just going to fail? So at what point do we stop doing preventative maintenance or even repair on a specific facility and move to something different? And that's one that's in your hands in terms of the facilities master plan idea.
Well, depending on the asset too and how much it's used and what that asset is, it may be cost prohibitive to replace it instead of repair. But, preventative maintenance is expensive anyway.
Sure.
But it's less expensive than just replacement.
Right.
And everything. So that's something we just need to keep our eyes on. But,
Yeah.
If we have to amend our CIP or fund balance policy, to shift some monies around to get caught up on this, so to say, and maybe get a better handle on it, that might be a great idea. It'd be a good way to infuse some cash right away into it and maybe get ahead of that curve that we need to.
Yeah. To your point about the preventative maintenance versus repair, we recently did the surge pool, or the surge deck for the pool, and that was an expensive project. But if that failed on us, it would have been a catastrophic fail, which likely could have resulted in a permanent closure of the pool.
Yep. Commissioner Nelson.
So, yeah, thank you. First of all, Mr. Chase and the administration team, I want to thank you guys for bringing this up. It's a big project. I think we need to spend some more time talking about it. I wanted to go to the fund balance policy that Commissioner Walters brought up. I think that's going to be a good discussion. The one thing, and you brought it up in your discussion, and that is the maintenance cost at a certain point, even on buildings, there is a savings. And like, if I remember back, there was like $1.2 million worth of upgrades that needed to be done on the building that we're replacing with Project Alpha. So having the data and the numbers and the plan like this is so incredibly helpful, because we don't always have to like the facts, but the facts are the facts. And so putting this in a quantitative form so we can manage it and budget for it, I think is so incredibly helpful and very responsible on the government's, for us to do for the people. So I say thank you for doing this. I think we need to dig into it. There's a lot here, but I think it's going to be a really good thing. So
Sure. We need to have spaces that our public is proud of. We need to have spaces that serve the public, and we need to have spaces that are effective for employees.
And when you're dumping costs into something that needs to be repaired and repaired and repaired at a certain point, and having a plan and the predictive plan. I'd never heard of AI and predictive maintenance, but that's a perfect use for AI. I mean, AI I think we all have a healthy skepticism and fear of it, but that's a great idea. I can see that being very helpful.
Commissioner Andrews.
Yeah, thank you, John, or Mr. Chase. I appreciate your work on this. Obviously, we've all been clamoring for this information for a while. It seems to me that what you're basically proposing is that we need to figure out what an annual maintenance, a preventative maintenance number would look like and budget for it on a regular basis instead of relying on a capital improvement fund that is filled in a, what I would call a sort of arbitrary, because it just depends on how the budget plays out in terms of how much we put into it. And I guess a question for you is, is that consistent? You're looking towards like what is a range of reasonable annual preventative maintenance number look like?
Yeah, that's where we're going. I don't have that specific number yet.
And that wasn't,
Yeah, okay.
I think you would have told us if you did. But the idea would be to put that in our budget as an ongoing operating O&M expense in
Yes.
our budget on an annual basis.
Yes, that's correct.
You mentioned that the facilities and then the facilities storage building at the Civic Center had an $804,000 proposed investment from the facilities master plan. And then you mentioned, well, we're going to move facilities over to this, to, you know, part of the new facility, but we're still going to have that building on the Civic Center campus, right?
Yes.
So some portion of that is, I mean, we still have a responsibility to maintain that building,
We
right?
still have we would still have a responsibility to maintain the building. Some of that is simply renovations to the building for functional use. So if that turns to a different use, that party that would be coming in and using that could potentially perform those renovations to suit their needs.
And then I guess one thought I have, you know, in terms of having an annual sort of range of reasonable data-backed preventative maintenance dollars built into our budget is a good idea. We know we're going to have repairs. You could probably have an annual budget for repairs. Capital improvements, it seems like, while I appreciate the process has been the way it's been set up historically, whereas we have a fund balance, we split the amount into those two pots. It seems like we still need to get a sense of what that number is, because we're still just setting a budget based on what the funding is without having a real sense of what the need is.
Yeah.
And if there is a big pot of deferred maintenance that needs to be addressed, then we need to make a funding plan for that. Just relying on our existing policy or even, you know, amended policy doesn't really move the needle. What we need is, what is the number, and then how we're going to pay for that, and what's the timeline that we can implement that.
So to some degree, we've the page that you see here, which is our CIP plan today, has those things in it. So it has things that we've said, these are the things that we feel are the highest priority. Let's put those in there now, and we're going to be looking to take care of those in 2025. The hardest part to determine of all of this is the repair piece. And Mr. Boc can testify to that I can't really determine at this point what's going to break and exactly when it's going to break. And it seems like everything that breaks costs $5,000
Yeah.
or more.
Is this the actual, is this a hypothetical on this slide, or is this the actual information from?
This is the actual information.
Is the proposals really to spend $250,000 on isolation cells in the jail in 2025?
That was actually on the 2024 capital as well.
Did we,
Just didn't execute yet.
we didn't approve that.
2024, yes.
We took a motion to approve it?
In 2024. That's for the 2024 CIP. It was part
Okay,
of
do
the
you remember
budget.
when that was?
Late in ‑23. This
Yeah.
was part of the
December.
general appropriations resolution.
If I may, aren't these juvenile isolation cells? Are these separate from that?
These are
Separate.
specifically requested from the sheriff, and the sheriff is here to address a need that they had in the jail for isolation cells. They brought it, they pitched it, and it was approved.
Commissioner Nelson.
And also, I wondered if you've brought Cunningham Limp into some of this planning, because as we're looking forward at some of our, again, like if some of these repairs, if there are facilities that we're going to be recommended that we move, change, remodel, tear down, also should incorporate that. But I think they have some experience that might help take a load off of that and help us make good decisions, because we want to do this right and get it set up so it kind of takes care of itself, and also help you get to the right answers. So
Sure. We've not brought Cunningham Limp into the discussion on any of the other properties. They've been specifically focused on the things that are within their scope that we've defined for them and given them the charge to do.
Commissioner Walter.
Yeah, this is a really granular example, but it might give us an opportunity for you to expand on it. So when we were walking through this building, the topic of windows came up, and it is a shared space with the city. Everybody knows that, but we talked about, we're not tearing this building down anytime soon, probably, and that we could, the windows, right, and the ceiling of the windows, that's a huge issue with the efficiency of the building. And it was brought up by several commissioners. I believe that there's a lot of, what we keep hearing about, a lot of federal funding out there for energy improvements related to facilities. And I'm wondering something like that, what is that in your wheelhouse? Do you have resources to pursue grants for something like that? And what would a project like that look like to you?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm a big fan of using other people's money.
It's our money. It's still our money.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, I'm a big fan of securing grants. So that's one that we will continue to look at. There's a few things that we've looked at already. We've not yet specifically looked at energy efficiency grants for windows. We did apply for and receive a grant for the replacement of the boilers at the law enforcement center, and so that covered about 3/4 of that cost. But we will continue to look at those options as well.
Do you feel like you have, I mean, you just took on another job, and I do see there, the openings now are out there for the deputy position, so that'll help free up some of your time, I think. But do we have the capacity, or do you have capacity in your department to pursue things like that? It feels like there's a lot out there that we are potentially leaving on the table as we're looking at facilities and energy improvements.
Sure. I can safely say that the capacity is not there now to do all those things, but our intention with the 2 positions that we're adding is to add that capacity.
So there will be some grant writing expectations
Yes.
Built into those positions?
And part of that is it gives me the opportunity to free up some of my time to work on some of those more strategic items like that.
Yeah, well, I know that the city would be in favor of, I think, joining a grant application like that for things like the windows in this shared space. So I encourage you to look into that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Commissioner Andrews?
thank you, Nate. Commissioner Alger, just the 2024, sorry, Administrator Alger, the 2024 facilities management budget that showed up from our meeting packets shows a grand total in the jail last year of $95,000, and there's no item for isolation cells. I'm not sure if we're looking at the same thing. This looks like it was from a December 2023 meeting. It just seems to me that a $250,000 investment would have caught the eye given the age of the jail.
I will go back and look at the budget presentation. The CIP fund was part of that budget presentation, and this item was part of that CIP discussion. So I'd have to get back and look at that and get back to you.
But that won't show in the operating budget?
It will. It's in the CIP budget that was included in that discussion.
Anything else you want to add, Mr. Chase?
I will get back to you, Commissioner Andrews.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to make a couple comments, if I may.
Yeah.
There is a way that we could really cleanly define what ongoing maintenance costs are going to be. And that is, we have a Tower Pinkster report that shows currently the maintenance needs of our facilities. In the event that there was an interest on behalf of the Board of Commissioners to move forward on a larger scale, we could bond for the current repairs, whatever that looks like. And then we would have the ability to say, we're level set as of 2030. What do those ongoing maintenance costs look like going forward? That's a way to do it. The other way is just as we are now, we're going to learn these maintenance costs. We're going to chip away at the major projects within the county with a potential funding source going forward. And so we'll keep working on it. But that is something that we have considered.
Ramping that up, though, could cost us a lot more up front, but it'd also give us the ability to get on top of it.
Correct.
Too, so
Yep.
it's a good idea. So, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chase.
Thank you.
Moving on to the agenda, we have 520 West Front Street discussion. Mr.
Yes,
Melcher?
thank you. So as you're aware, COA has left the building at 520 West Front Street. They're now housed in a joint or collaborative effort with the AAA, Area Agency on Aging, on Park Drive. The move went very well. They're very happy with being where they are, and it seems to be working very well. So I'm grateful for that opportunity. MSUE is still housed within the 520 West Front Street building, and we are currently working with the City of Traverse City on the lease agreements between 851 Woodmere and the City Police and the Sheriff's Department, as well as 520 West Front Street. We have whittled down the agreements to the point where we now, in concept, agree that we could go forward with those and bring those to the Board of Commissioners and the City Commission. We still haven't finalized it yet, but we're very close to meeting the terms of how do we split those buildings up. We have been discussing with the city manager. They have interest in moving city fire into the building. We have interest in protecting MSU staff as well. We're discussing that currently. We have another meeting on October 31st. We are working towards a solution, but we have a letter from the city manager indicating that they need to have MSUE out of the building by the end of, is it end of or midsummer? Midsummer 2026.
The draft lease agreements we're working on right now as a termination date for the end of 2026.
So we are working through that process, and we will have to find, by agreement that we have with MSUE, we have to provide them space. We are looking at options. Jennifer Berkey, the director of MSUE, is also looking for options. She has spoken with the college, MSU, and we're looking for available space for them. We've talked about splitting them up in different locations if in the event that was necessary. We have some space here in the Gov Center, but we're looking. Other options have become available to at least discuss and contemplate. We're working towards that.
So we are, with our agreement with MSU Extension, we're required to house them, and they don't pay us for that, right? It's just part of the agreement. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, the reason I did ask Ms. Berkey if she would reach out to her boss at MSU and inquire if they would be willing to help offset some of the rent that could be incurred by the county if we had to house them elsewhere. And she has done that, and it sounds like, without an agreement in place, it sounds like they have some interest in that.
And are part of those discussions looking at the possibility of you said there's space in this building, it would just require renovation. And then since it's sort of all connected with moving people around in parts, we're looking at obviously moving 911 and dispatch, and how much space would that take up, and is it even possible they would be out by mid-2026?
The dispatch center? I think it is.
Yeah.
It is possible.
So, okay, so there are some good options other than leasing other space. It feels like because we have space, it seems silly to lease other space. That feels like a waste of money.
If that's an option too, we may be able to free up the current EOC too, if this new building is complete and everything. So that's a space that we could look at for whatever. I'm not saying it has to be somebody besides the health department, but that is space that could be freed up with maybe temporary offices put in there or something like that, partition offices or so.
We have talked about remote work opportunities. We've talked about shared space opportunities. We've talked about many possibilities, and Jennifer is great to work with. She's open and she's actively researching as well. It cracks me up because she always says, I'm not looking for anything bougie. I'm not even sure I know what bougie means, but she's very reasonable to deal with in this discussion.
Okay.
But yes, we do have the obligation per our agreement to house MSUE.
Have we looked at what costs are to renovate part of the garden level again into office space?
The cafeteria area? Not recently. We do have a schematic of what that could look like from a previous, John slate.
Well, I believe we have that detail in the FMP, what it would take to do a basement renovation.
Okay.
The challenge with the basement renovation and the cafeteria space is it's joint ownership, so it's used by both the city and the county. So we'd have to mutually agree that could become MSUE space.
I would suggest that as we try to talk with the city about them getting in the rest of the space on 520 East Front there, West Front, excuse me, that may be part of the discussion. It's like, you can have it, but we need the basement so we can move Michigan instead, MSU extended service, excuse me. It's that darn donut. So, to move them here in the basement.
Yeah,
Because if we're going to spend money, I'd rather spend money making this a usable space and taking care of some of the wasted space that's down there than paying rent to somebody else.
Yeah, understood. Largely, the consideration for the 520 West Front Street has been the 851 Woodmere goes to the county. So that's largely been the consideration that we've discussed in that agreement. But I can certainly, we have another meeting with Ms. Vogel and her staff on the books. I can't exactly remember what day it is, but it's coming up. We can include that in the discussion.
How much of the senior center staff will move over to the new senior center, or what will anything change with those offices opening up over there on the
So
bay?
we are currently talking about this. When you walk into the new senior center, there is no real office space. The former director, Ms. Crum, worked with Michelle Hunt, the Parks and Rec director from the city, in discussing what that senior center operation would look like. Michelle Crum envisioned staff being present at the senior center location in Traverse City, but also throughout the county providing services at different locations. So as you walk into that facility, there are 4 or 5 stations and an open kiosk area where staff will be placed. So we will have some space here as well that will remain available once those staff members take those spaces.
Okay, so some staff, but not the whole department will move there, and some will, okay.
Do you recall how many are on MSUE here?
I think 13.
13, okay. I knew it was around that dozen mark, but, okay.
2 of which are county employees specifically, and the rest are all MSUE staff.
Okay. Anything else?
So we have a new senior center director identified. We toured the building yesterday with the assistant city manager and Ms. Hunt. We're working through these discussions currently and looking for opportunities with the new location, how we can enter that and kind of get situated.
Anybody else have any other questions for our administrator? Seeing none, we're going to move on, but I'd like to take a 5-minute recess before we get on to the last topic and everything. So we're in recess.
Thank you.
Okay, we're adjourned then.
Well, see, that's funny that you say that, because
It's past the life expectancy.
Wait till our administrator gets back.
part of the reason why.
So they're around other, they'll be social with other.
Yeah, that's the goal, is, you know, because, you
Look
know,
at
when
these
you're
numbers. I looked at the other day and it's like, man, the more we can, Leelanau County, the
Bingo.
cheaper it is for us.
It's all of that, stuff that's good for you, it adds years to your life.
Yeah.
Good for you.
That's
Ready
the-
for
That's
that.
the plan. That's the plan.
Yeah.
I search for that thing. Ask Chat GPT.
Good, how you doing,
Do
Chris?
you use that?
Well, thank you.
I love it.
Week's going well?
I found like really
Much
great.
better than
I
Google.
rode my bike
Way better
today.
than Google.
You know why?
It's kind of crazy.
Good.
It kind of like teaches me. It's like,
Good, number one.
Recess and call the meeting to order. Next up on the agenda, we have information received from the sheriff's office, and this information was requested a couple meetings ago and everything, so we have Sheriff Shea here, so if we have any questions, I guess, or do you want to say something first, Sheriff?
Well, yeah, what Mike Shea, Grand Traverse County Sheriff. First of all, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge or ask you to acknowledge the amount of pictures that Mr. Chase showed that were the jail. Some you didn't even recognize, but anyhow, it's worth pointing out. Second of all, I apologize for you not having the stats that you have now at your last BOC meeting, because when it was brought up in the study session, I was not aware that you were requesting it by the next BOC. So as soon as I received those stats, I had Captain Barchef immediately push them out to you.
Okay, thank
So
you.
with that, I would
And he
open it
did,
up.
thank you. He did send them right away, so thank you.
Yep. Okay, anybody have any questions for the sheriff? Commissioner Andrews?
Thank you. Are there any limits? It looks like, I forget, I'm going to get the terminology wrong. When we board an inmate in Leelanau, Clare, Benzie, one of the other jails, it looks like the costs come in at about $30 to $35 per inmate per night. Is that
Yes.
my math about right there? Are there any limit? There must be limits on how many. It looks like we send an average of, I don't know, 10 maybe?
Each facility kind of has their own quantitative limit, if that answers your
Yeah,
question.
and I guess it appears to me that, and I'm interested to get your perspective, that offers us an opportunity to solve a short-term problem, at least, when we have restraints in personnel, in other facility challenge or cost-bearing challenges at the jail, at that level of, and I assume there's more to it than this. We have to transport? Is there transport involved?
So to answer your question, yes, to a degree. Let's use Claire, for example. The majority of the people that we're able to house at Claire are sentenced. So we don't have the issues of back and forth to court, writs, and everything else. The ones that are not, we try and keep a little closer, and Lieutenant Argyle can get into the real specifics on how we identify those people. But yes, it is, well, that's why we're doing it, for example, right now. It does help not only our staff that we currently have, it's relatively affordable, and it only makes sense that we are kind of testing the water. Where are there facilities that are willing to assist with housing inmates when we need them?
What has your experience been in terms of the the transaction? Is it easy to do this? Is it kind of a hassle? Does it require a lot of planning and forethought? What are the relationships like in terms of how you and your team are able to take advantage of their available capacity?
I think I'd like Lieutenant Argyle to comment on that, because he's kind of the one that makes those phone calls and arranges it. And I know that when I ask, it's relatively quickly we're able to identify where and how many that they can take. So.
And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what are the pros and cons of continuing to rely on that as a safety net for capacity shortages that we have at the jail? Just, I don't want to set you up where this is a terrible use of internal resources that aren't reflected in the numbers, just that it's $35 a night. You know what I mean? So are there downsides to continuing, at least in the short term, to rely on that as an option? And to the extent you can speak to that, what are the challenges? I assume it's challenging for family members, but maybe not.
Please introduce yourself for those at home. Can you use the mic, please?
Voting out or keeping them there? I mean, this huge number we have out right now was a decision based on the staffing level. And we had to take it down, we had to board out enough to close down one whole entire unit in order to reduce the amount of staff. And so, before, when we were primarily just using Leelanau and Benzie, that was based on just an overall number. Because with classification, even though the capacity of the jail is 168, you can't house 168. If you look at the jail today, each one of the cells, even though it's a 6-man cell or an 8-man cell or a 16-man cell, person cell, there's beds in there that you can't use, and it's based on classification. If I don't have people that fit that classification, I may run a 6-person cell with only 5 people in there for days and days and days because of that. And so in order to reduce the overall number in the jail, be able to run with the staffing that we have, that is where Clare County came in. The reason that Clare County was easier to use is because Clare is big enough that they were able to take a higher level classification. And that's where I would have to look at the numbers again. A good majority of the ones that are in Clare are mostly felons. And every week we make a trip for people that have to come back for court. And whereas with Leelanau and Benzie, a lot of those people are sentenced, whether it's district court or circuit court. Most of the time when we use Leelanau and Benzie, they're sentenced. And so the trips were fewer, but not always. Does that kind of answer your question?
That's very helpful.
But I think to your point, Commissioner, when we make the decision that we want to board people out, how difficult is it to find one of these facilities that is willing to take some inmates?
When I put that out to the thread. I got about 6 or 8 responses back. Some of them were just too small. One of the counties only has 32 beds to take people there. Some of the counties were just too far away. Lapeer was a great partner when we used them. It's just 208 miles. And so if something pops up and we need to go get them, it's a 2-officer trip, and it's 6 to 7 hours round trip. And so and then too, a lot of the counties that offered, it was a question, can they take females? And what level classification can they house? Leelanau has been a great partner. They typically refrain from taking the female inmates. And so.
Are the medical costs a pass-through back to us when the inmate, in, say, Clare County or Leelanau, and how do they compare to the medical costs that we incur for the same types of things?
I will answer that because that's an ongoing discussion as we speak. Per Captain Barshef, currently the only additional expenditures that we have received from boarding out our inmates has been prescription costs. We are currently in the process of updating those agreements with these other entities, and we have written in language that states any additional medical costs shall be cleared by our current medical provider before that service is provided. So are we theoretically on the hook for that? Yes. But we added that language so it's not open-ended.
To avoid surprises.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Walter?
Thanks. Yeah. So the information you provided, which is really helpful, by the way, just to understand this a little bit more. This was overtime. Of course, 2024 isn't in here yet, but we really jumped up quite a bit in overtime pay in 2023, and I'm assuming that is related to, the national shortage, really, of corrections officers and that crisis level of not having enough corrections officers. Is that correct?
So if you look at the data, it was kind of interesting because in 2023, we had one of our highest staffing levels that we've had over the course of the
Yeah, that was
year
it.
that we had. So I went back to Captain Barshef and I said, we need to analyze this better. We're missing a component. What's our average daily head count? So when you look at what our average daily head count is, it's high. You look at our boarding out costs, it's high. Meaning our population was very high. With that comes all of these other ambiances of medical runs. We have writs that we have to go get people to bring them back. It's a variety. Everything is exponential. And so when we dug into it, we were able to say, yeah, that all makes sense, right? Because on its face, it looked like, wait a minute. When our staffing levels are higher, our overtime costs are higher, and our boarding out costs are higher. Why is that?
Yeah.
So you have to add the other component in there.
And is that pretty much what happened this year, too, even though we don't see it yet here? Has it been about the same this year?
In 2024?
No, this right here, overtime. Yeah.
Except the inverse is there with staffing levels. We're going to be at low staffing levels, whereas in 2023, we were at higher staffing levels.
Uh-huh. So are you in favor of doing more boarding out, like just as a, you're smiling, as a policy?
It's
because, gosh, it's like the
room,
cheapest
right?
place to stay in Leelanau County.
I guess this commission has got to decide, moving forward, what we're going to do with the jail, how we're going to staff that jail. And I am strongly looking at our staffing plan and what we are going to do with some of these FTE positions that we can't fill. And if I can do something by changing the staffing plan that can make us more efficient dealing with the current situation that we have, I have an obligation to do that. And that's where I'm at. to ask me if I think that's the fix, there are venues out there that are doing just that. The smaller ones are not operating a jail. They are contracting with another correctional facility to take their inmates, and they're having a holding facility.
I don't think it's a long-term solution at all. I don't think anybody would advocate for that. But, until we figure out a better way forward, better vision for how we make all this work, does that help at all with these exploding overtime costs and not being able to fill positions? And, it makes a dent in it, right? But what's the tipping point? And do you have a sense of that?
That's our hope. By doing this, we're kind of testing the waters too to see what is out there, what are our available options. Staffing levels are very low. They're nationally very low. And we're fighting the same battle everybody else is. So we have to look at what are other resources we can do, which is what we're doing. And I personally feel that the number of $35 a day is a very economical, reasonable figure to do that. But there's other costs that are associated, transports and so forth, that we need to be aware of too.
Do we have any sense of the all-in cost for that?
It's so variable.
Yeah,
because
depending on the inmate and
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. And, to add to one of your initial points, maybe it was Commissioner Andrews, it does make it difficult for family members, right? Visitation. If video visitation is provided, okay, well, at least there's that. But if it's not, and that particular facility only has in-person, now you have travel. Now we're back to the whole situation with the juveniles. How far away? Family is a very instrumental component of the wholeness process and the healing process. So it's a whole juggling act.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things I always see with the jail, and I don't mean this to sound like being critical, I'm not, but it's always the look back, and I guess I'd like to see the future, kind of like what Mr. Chase was looking at. If we could have an analysis of how has it worked, how does it look now, and what programs, plans, staffing, facilities, everything looking forward, so we can help figure out what is the best course, because this is a head scratcher, and we've got variables and options, and if we had a new facility, how does that affect staffing? We don't have a new facility where we don't spend the money. What is that costing us? What is the new cost? All that analysis would be very, I think, helpful for us, and we need to work on that and help us understand what the future looks like, as opposed we understand we have a problem right now, but what will the fix look like?
I'm not going to dispute that it would be helpful. There's a couple of questions. Do you do it moving forward with the current facility? Do you do it with a new facility? How big a facility? With no direction from the commission on what your thoughts are, it, with all due respect, is kind of a waste of our time that we just don't have.
Well, I think
we're a 24-hour facility, and we got to keep operating.
Right.
And to go out and study and say, I want to see how efficient a 200-bed facility with new design, with programming rooms, would look, and how much staffing that would take, until we're ready to really move forward. This is a 20, 30-year conversation that's been ongoing.
Right.
And I mean that with the utmost respect.
No, I understand. But I'm not a jail expert. I don't know what current jails look like. We'd have to do, maybe it's something that this commission undertakes, or that we have the facilities undertake, or we have Tower Pinks or somebody. But I think for us to just throw a dart or keep looking at a problem, we need to look at the solutions and what those solutions look like. And I think you guys are an integral part of what that should look like, and what you would see. What do you hear from other people? You guys are in that business. It's hard for me to even, I don't know what I don't know.
So I guess, can you give me some direction? What are you asking us to do?
I don't have it would have to be a board action.
Okay.
But I'm here for conversation. I can't direct you to do anything, and I'm not intending to. So to be clear.
I think moving forward at a regular board meeting or something, maybe it'd be a topic of a discussion where we could create an ad hoc and narrow down some options and stuff like that, but.
Yeah, if we can sit shoulder to shoulder, work as a team and figure out how do we move forward? Because it is a frustration. We've been chewing our cud on this for a long time.
Commissioner Seifert?
Yeah, couple of quick questions. And these things, is there a way that you could send us for the last 5 years of your jail inmate population, which ones were waiting a trial in jail and which ones had already been sentenced? What's the difference? Is there a way you can delineate that out?
That changes on a daily basis.
An average is fine. I don't mean to make it overly onerous,
the
but,
ratio of,
well, it's like we're talking about, hey, let's keep the people that we need here that have to go to court to keep our transportation costs down, and we're shipping out all these other people. It doesn't make sense to me that we're shipping people out to another facility in another county or 3 or 4 counties away, that in a week we have to bring back for court. I know that that's not a perfect system, but I was wondering if that was an available metric.
Let us work on that. I think I understand what you're asking.
Thank you. Second question I have, and this actually is for Mr. Boc. Mr. Boc, what's a full-time employee that corrections officer cost the county a year? Roughly.
All in.
Probably 75,000 at the low end of the scale, maybe 85,000 on the high end of the scale. And, we would have to give you an average because some individuals are single to take.
Okay.
But
so if we look at
we have that information, but again, we could just provide an average cost.
Well, actually, that works for me right there. So if we talk about overtime, and overtime seems high, but I want to say, let's just say 80 grand a year as a corrections officer that costs us with retirement, benefits and things like that. So in 2023, what is that? 46 is like 7.5 extra corrections officers that we had.
Well, that amount did not include an overtime. The overtime would have to be, the only way you could really look at that, in my opinion, is take the corrections officers. We have 34, determine what the total payroll is, including the overtime, and then calculate an average.
Well,
because you do have, we pretty consistently, depending on, no matter what the staffing levels are or the boarding out, you're going to have overtime. As the sheriff indicated, things come up, you're taking the inmates to court, running them for health services, writs.
Well, my point with that was, and I'm sorry it was convoluted, that I agree that we're always going to have overtime. But as we talk about unfilled positions, it's cheaper to run overtime than to fill those with people. Because if one person works 20 hours overtime, or he works 40 hours overtime, it's still cheaper for the county to have that than to have 2 staff, because we're not paying extra benefits for that
I
person.
don't know, there's $450,000 worth of overtime in 2023, just.
Yeah, which is
That doesn't
7
feel-
staff. It's 7 staff members. It's not even.
But there's not 7 unfilled positions. They don't need 7
They have
people.
9.
Well, I guess the one thing I'd want to inject on behalf of the corrections officers is you're killing them.
Right.
So
That was the point.
I'm with you on the math part of it, but it's not sustainable.
How many shortages in corrections officers do we have today?
9. I think we're 9 down.
So we're down 9.
So we have 9, we have 9 with 6 in the hiring
Ending.
process, one level or, another.
Okay. Commissioner Morris, I seen your hand.
yes, so I'm looking more big picture, and I'm going to ask you things a different way, and maybe you might feel comfortable answering. Because I was able to meet with members of a county who had done what I perceive is the pie in the sky, and gave us thoughts on how they did it. If you could wave a magic wand, or have us wave a magic wand, and give us your pie in the sky, what you perceive as the utopia of corrections, what would that look like, considering all the mental health aspects and all the things that we've been talking about for the last couple of years? What would that look like to you?
Well, first I would qualify this statement in that I would want to go out and look at some of these facilities and talk to different people. But ideally, in looking at what our main issues are currently, you would have separate wings, mental health wings, you would have possibly an educational wing, you would then have obviously your lockdown facilities. It could be a transitional portion as well, so that when a person is getting ready to be released and they're going through that discharge planning, there is more of a step back into reality, so it's not just open the door, throw you out in the street, and shut the door, which is currently what we basically have. There are some facilities out there that have done a very good job. We have been invited to go tour numerous ones, but again, I'm going to fall back on my original statement. We've been doing this for so long, and I've told a lot of you already, I am not going to waste the taxpayers' money by going and touring facilities that by the time we actually possibly get some direction from our board, it's already outdated. When you give me the green light, I will be more than willing. I would love to sit on a committee. I like that idea to have a group of us go and tour different facilities, find out what's best practices, what works, what doesn't, and then bring a report back to you. Absolutely. But my predecessor and before, they've all done all this over and over, and I think the administrator will testify to this. I just don't, I mean, I don't know how much more data we need to show even Tower Pinkster's report. What was the number one thing up there, right? But that's not my purpose to stand here and, beat on this and say, hey, we need this, we need that. I think it's evident what we need. It's what do we want and how do we want to move forward as a county. And once we make that decision and you give us direction, we'll do whatever you want.
Okay. Commissioner Walter?
Yeah, we had a little bit of this discussion earlier this year, and it was on the list of study sessions that we had requested back in April to make sure to have, and that is just this exact conversation, but also a holistic view where we bring in mental health and juvenile justice and look at it not in silos, because it's not just a jail building, right? We're talking about diversion and criminal justice and mental health and healthcare and substance abuse. And we can't just look at, do we want a new building or not? I think we all know we need a new building, but what the kind of why behind that has to do with all of these other interconnected issues. And without a bigger discussion of how are we going to, divert people through the drug courts or through all these other things that we have in our community, and how do we better connect them to keep people out of jail? And then when they're in there, what kind of mental health services are we providing? So I think I still want to have that. We requested that. We haven't had that. And it looks like we can't make any motions today. That motion was already made earlier this year anyway. But I think that is something collectively we do want to have and bring in some other voices as well on the mental health and substance abuse side in the courts as well, to have another, I don't know if it's a study session or if it's more of a workshop kind of thing. I mean, that's not just a 2-hour discussion, right? And maybe an ad hoc comes out of that. But it was requested to have that discussion, and part of it is FMP related, right? But we can't decide just on a building without a better idea of the holistic picture of the problem and how we want to go about solving it. So I would request again, although I'm not making a motion because I can't, that we follow what we wanted to do back earlier this year and have that study session, and make sure that gets on the calendar. And then I don't know are we going to also drill back into these positions, since part of the reason for bringing this data was to talk about the positions that were requested. So can we circle back on that unless we want to talk more about the data that's here?
I think it shows what we got sent there, that for since 2019, we've had shortages with the staffing levels in the jail and everything. But as the sheriff had just mentioned there, they got 6 in the works right now and everything, so it sounds like they're making some progress to get back around that 30 or 31 mark. And everybody knows it's a nationwide shortage and everything, so it's just doing what we can to get them in here. But I mean, historically speaking, we've been short-staffed there for a number of years now, on average.
Yeah. Is there any update on the CMH situation from the meeting that took place, or where are we with that related to the disagreement about funding those services in the jail that anybody can share?
So we have received correspondence from Erica Longstreet. I think she's the new CFO for Northern Lakes CMH. She wants to have a meeting. Sheriff and I are trying to coordinate that with her.
So what I will tell you is, after that meeting, I did have 3 different conversations with individuals from Northern Lakes, and there seemed to be a little bit of confusion on their end with respect to the final version of the enabling agreement. And so I did forward them what I had is identified as final draft number 7, but I qualified that I don't know for certain this is the final end product. But there was and is specifically in that draft language that deals with jail diversion and services to be provided in the jail. The question then that's presented is, what does that interpret? There are different interpretations of that. And I left it with, I'm willing to work with you. We have a program that we were doing that was working very well, and that's what I would like to see. Whether or not they are willing and whether or not they are able to do that is yet to be seen. But I know Erica, for example, she's more than willing, and she wants to sit down with us and see what we can figure out. Mr. Martinez, same thing. He said, let's figure this out. So it's just, I don't like that we're still kicking it down the road, but we are. And hopefully we can come to some sort of agreement. But the reality of it is, their staffing is a major issue as well. And I don't know how that looks on the county's end. If they may want to do it, but if they can't do it, what does that mean? We still need the position.
Commissioner Flynn?
You mentioned you were working on like a new FTE plan, staffing plan. Are you taking in consideration of these 2 new positions and stepping back a little bit with other corrections officers, or?
I'll just throw it out there, and again, I'm not committing to this. But to put it in plain English, I am looking at possibly taking one of our FTEs and changing it from a corrections officer position to, if we are not able to obtain a discharge planner and a diversion specialist, put a person in that spot. We desperately need it. And then I guess we deal with the fight of getting that FTE back down the road if need be. I don't like it because of, historically, we know how difficult it has been to come in front of not necessarily this particular board, but the board, and request a new staffing position. We're having the discussion right now. And so I have my concerns. And as the administrator mentioned, we've already done this kind of without changing the actual staffing plan on the field services and detective end, where we needed an analyst. We had the extra funding. We agreed jointly to go ahead and fill that position because we were understaffed. We are becoming fully staffed, and now in the near future we will have this conversation again about what do we do to make that a permanent position. But again, to your point, you're 100% right, Commissioner. We're just doing the same thing over and over and over. And it's insanity. We know that. So that's why we are looking at these other boarding out issues. We are looking at taking one of these FTEs and saying, okay, let's do this and deal with that when we have to. The isolation cells that were in question, that conversation was brought up, and the reason behind it is they were identified as something that has caused us great difficulty in the past because we're in short supply of them. So the agreement was made by this board to go ahead and fund a remodeling project that would allow us to create 3 new ones and alter the booking area so that we could, in fact, gain those isolation cells, as well as have the booking area be somewhat more private, because right now it's right in front of everyone, and it causes its issues on its own. Unfortunately, it has taken this long to get to, we're waiting, correct me if I'm wrong, on the architect to come back with the actual drawings. We're almost at the end of 2024. So I apologize to you all for not being done by now. It should have been done. Is it a Band-Aid? Yes. But that's all we've been doing for the last several years. And we, meaning the jail, or the sheriff's office, has to continue doing that until we get direction.
Well, Sheriff, I do appreciate you saying you'd be willing to take one of your FTEs and make it into that discharge planner and everything. I do think that would be an immediate resolution, just because you could hire somebody by doing that. And if we look at since 2019 staffing, it has not hit the 34 mark anyway. I would definitely be comfortable to know that you're consistent with your corrections officer numbers, and have you come back and ask for another corrections officer. But my opinion, and I know we're not making decisions today, I think it'd be a great idea if you took one of your FTEs and hired a discharge planner right now. That's just my opinion, and I think coming with these numbers and everything justifies that, and I do believe that in the future, if you can show that you're consistently maintaining that 32, 33 level, but you need another one, I'm sure this board would be willing to say, yeah. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but you guys stress the importance of this discharge planner, and to me, if it's that important, take one of the FTEs right now and hire that discharge planner. That's my opinion.
I appreciate your opinion.
Any other questions? Did you have a hand up, Commissioner Walter?
Well, I just wanted clarification. There was some back and forth at the last meeting on funding that could be appropriated to the other position, like the mental health. Forgive me for not knowing the name of the position, but not the discharge one, but the other one.
Diversion?
The jail diversion. And that one was partially mental health, partially substance use, right? It's a little bit of both. And then there was some like, well, CMH can't do the substance use part of it. They can only do the mental health. Is that where we landed on that? That, like, really that position can't fully be covered by CMH anyway? Or we don't know that for sure?
That was from the court. The court wanted that.
I think that's yet to be determined.
Okay. Well, where I'm going with that is, if it's determined that obviously we need that position, it was successful to your mind, it's needed, and CMH, this whole CMH argument about what covers it, it doesn't maybe cover that substance use piece anyway. So I'd be in favor of at least a position that is covering that piece and mental health as well, but at least knowing we can get that person in there, and then figure out the CMH piece for the other aspect of it. That's my overall feeling. That I know you were looking for direction for positions, but.
Well, like I just stated, I feel if it's of an importance to our captain and our sheriff and even our lieutenant and everything, sacrifice one of your FTEs right now, hire this discharge planner. We talked about this 2 weeks ago, I believe.
That's a different position, though, that we're talking about.
Discharge planner diversion person. It's just, they're going to do the same role, right?
No, but that's not the one.
Well, I mean, it's the same two positions in one, the way I understood it. But anyway, I'm just saying, last time I talked to Captain Barsheft, he thought there was possibly up to 3 people interested in these positions that he had conversations with on the side and everything. My thoughts are we've wasted 2 weeks in a sense of not hiring somebody, but I appreciate you saying that you may sacrifice an FTE to hire that person, And that's what I'd like to see if this position would actually divert some future problems and help the flow of the jail and everything. So, anything else?
So I will say that the sheriff is very willing, and we've had very good conversations about all of this. And, we're committed to working through it and getting into that discussion with CMH, because it's not only the enabling agreement. We have had previous agreements with CMH dated back to 2013, 2014 that specifically addressed the mental health aspect of our jails, courts, and prosecutors. It was an agreement between the prosecutor, the courts, the sheriff, and CMH on how they manage diversion for those with mental health issues. So we just need to get into that meeting, and it's just the calendars have to align. As it stands right now, we are prepared to move forward with a budget without any personnel recommendations. We don't know what this board truly wants to see collectively, I guess. We have insight to some of these positions, but without direction, we're ready to go forward without adding any personnel, new personnel to that budget. I know the sheriff has expressed willingness to do some things with his discharge planner. That's great. The funds we're not recommending reducing 9 staff members, but we need to have a better understanding of what does the current scenario with boarding look like, and what does it look like potentially going forward. Is there cost savings? What's the cost of boarding out? What's the savings on the personnel side? And we just need some time to get our hands wrapped around that. But the sheriff and I are having conversations about potential scenarios where we could test something out for a period of time, and it's just we're not ready to go there yet. Is that fair, Sheriff?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your input today, Sheriff and Lieutenant, and some great information put in front of us and everything, so I look forward to moving forward with it. So thank you.
And while the sheriff is still here, I did go back, and we were able to find the 2 documents associated with the isolation cells. That was a December 13th, 2023, and a December 20th, 2003 meeting on the budget. The first was a study session. So those isolation cells were within that capital improvement budget. But Sheriff, correct me, did Captain Barchef present that as well earlier in the, yes?
Yeah.
Thank you, but neither of those memos reference the amount, only that isolation cells were in it and contributed to the $1.45 million overall budget. So I don't know when we go through and got the itemized list and the amounts of each item.
It was December 13th.
Right, but when
If you look at the proposed capital improvement plan under the jail, it does say the isolation cells in the amount of $250,000.
Okay, which page are you on?
20 of 26.
Page 20 of 26.
Page 20 of 26, thank you. Okay, that's a non-searchable page. Thank
We
you.
are, I don't know why that is currently, Commissioner, but we are,
I don't know why.
it's worked previously, and we're working with iCompass currently to try to
Okay,
fix
it seems
that.
like iCompass has had some illnesses lately. It's very difficult to work
They're
with.
lacking direction.
Yeah, lacking direction.
Thank you.
All set?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Moving on our agenda, second public comment. Does anybody have a public comment? Seeing none, we are adjourned at 10:57 a.m.
Thank you.
Good job on us.